skills worthy of a general. If you want to fight, fight with me.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Live with Weiss, the place in which all of us get to share our passions, our stories, our expertise on the show so that anyone that is watching can pull something away from it. And today is no exception. Today, we are going to have a blast talking about a particular area, which is in sales education. This one is near and dear to me, of course, because I come from the sales enablement world. For those of you that don't know what sales enablement is, it is literally the ability to enable sales teams to lift and create success within the sales organization. Now, of course, my guest today comes from three different areas that combine together to create such a powerful connection between in the enablement role. I have Steve Gowa here. So Steve, in particular, has his master's in education and has also sold for many years in enterprise sales and everything else. And now he's in the sales enablement role, combining his skills to create and form new ways of sales enablement in the way in which we look at it. So today, I'd like to introduce the one, the only, Steve. Steve, what's going on, dude?
Hey, trying to match your high level of energy in the morning. It is really good to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you jumping on with me. You know, we've worked together in the past. The way in which you explain things, I really appreciate. You paint the picture perfect for me. And let's just dive right into it. As I ask every other person that joins our session, Steve, why on earth, let's just change that, is the sales education system truly broken today?
Yeah, I think your meme kind of said it better than I ever could. I think it was from Futurama, and it was, can't tell if nothing is broken or everything is broken, right? I think we're in this really interesting moment where finally we are able to collect meaningful data and make use of it in the sales space and in the education space, right? Two different worlds that are infinitely complex and are constantly being tinkered with. And today we have a unique opportunity in both to actually drive meaningful improvement and then study the results. To this point, that really hasn't been happening. So if you just look at education in general,
yeah,
I'm talking like the public school system and universities, there's a lot of questions flying around about that. And if you've been in sales, you also know that you've learned 100 different sales methodologies and are still oftentimes left scratching your head or trying to fit a methodology into, kind of shoehorn it into a conversation in a way that feels awkward. So how can we combine these worlds to both use data and a level of thoughtfulness to learn like better ways to sell? Can never be perfect, and then find new ways to teach it as well. And so sort of answering your question with a question at the end, but it's one that I try and answer every day.
I'll tell you this. So the two things you mentioned right off the bat are super important. The education system in general is still in catch-up mode, right? And I just look at it just in basic education. And trust me, I haven't been in education for long enough, so you can prove me wrong or not. Obviously, you've been in the education system before and still are in education, correct?
Yes, I am.
So for me, when I see the education system, the future is moving a lot faster than the actual system and the tactics that are put in place for learning and development. And when I combine those together and I look at, let's say, colleges as an example, we all go to college. Most of the time, we're just trying to survive. Can we survive on our own, or are we incapable of surviving on our own? And then there are some of us who are going for specific degrees to make sure that we follow our passion and our roots moving forward. But one thing that I've noticed is that, obviously there's lots of people that go to college. and lots of people that turn into sellers. And the funny thing about that, and this has always puzzled me, is that, like, where's my 101 on sales in college or in high school? Where's my advanced degree? Where's my master's degree in sales? And maybe because it just doesn't exist, or we haven't thought about it. In this case, I have to go to different courses that are taught by seasoned sellers who have created these formulas, who have created these books and presentations to do it, but the actual system itself doesn't have it. So I look at that from that perspective. Then, of course, in a sales way, you're learning 100 different things as a seller. You're learning different methodologies. You're learning different tactics from different people, right? You have great managers who have been great sellers, but then you also have institutions that you're working for that do have very great programs in place to help you lift your skills and lift the way you think. But that's not always the case. It's actually, tough. And I can appreciate, at least today, that businesses are really starting to invest in their sales education world. It's just a matter of, are we actually doing correctly in the first place? Are we bringing in the right people? Are we looking at the right things? Like you said, we got to think about data, got to think about emotions.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. So if you look at Salesforce as the example, they are now devoting, I think it's 10% of their Salesforce's work time to enablement. 10% may not sound like a lot, but that is 1/2 of one workday every week. And cumulatively, that is an investment at Salesforce, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. I think that we should ask this company is very good at collecting data. I'm not saying that they're perfect, but they made a really intentional investment of their people's time. That time could be spent selling. So why are they doing that? And also, what is the fallout of that going to be? Many people in that thousands, tens of thousands strong Salesforce will move into other positions at other companies and other leadership positions. And so I think we're going to see a windfall in the space, which is really good, because what we also know is that one salesperson changes or loses their job, there's a very high rate of attrition, often forced, every 15 months. So Salesforce, I think, may be beginning to address that. I think that the enablement space will continue to increase. As a result, you're already starting to see that trend for different reasons. I think in the pandemic, we're just beginning to look at a different way. And you have companies like Gong and Chorus and Outreach and others that are also beginning to say, hey, we should look at this different, and they're pretty effective. But I'll challenge you on one thing. And you had mentioned something to the effect of, you are not an expert of education. I would argue, if you spend 6 hours a day, whatever it is, in education from age, call it 4, maybe 3, maybe 5,
okay,
through college, you spend 18 years, 6, whatever it is, several hours a day in this system. And undoubtedly you've walked away feeling that wasn't great. You have probably a lot, everybody has had a good teacher in their lifetime, and several probably. Sure. But I think a lot of times you're able to realize when your education experience wasn't great. Let me add a caveat, like been a teacher, it's a crazy hard job. You work really hard. There's too many demands, and we can't be over iterative. There's no such thing as perfect. So sometimes you're like, that was fine, that class, like that could be okay at times too. I'm not saying that we have to, burn the building down here. Right. But you've spent a ton of time here, and you've spent time teaching. And I would say we should all give ourselves a little bit of credit and saying, well, we realize that there's faults to the system. We realize that there are certain ways of teaching and assessing that weren't effective for us. We've seen smart people around us fail, and people who maybe got really great grades but didn't have good careers, or we could poke holes in how they used logic and things like that. So I think we should give ourselves a little bit of credit, one, in our understanding of education, and two, be willing to think outside the box. Yeah, good pat on the back. And be willing to think outside the box. And like, I hate abusing this term. We spoke a little bit about it, but like, a little bit of disruption in this space is okay, so long as you're also willing to say, let's not let perfect be the enemy of the good. Education's really hard and nuanced, and I just don't want to over-iterate.
I'll tell you this, there's a phrase that I run about the term perfect. So you can take this as you like. Practice makes permanent. Nothing is perfect unless if you're practicing perfectly. So perfect practice makes perfect, but we're constantly adjusting. We're constantly changing. And for those of you that are watching in the sales world or any part of your business organization, you can think of right off the bat, I'll ask you this. What has changed from last year to this year? Probably a whole lot. Now that I think about it, like the pandemic totally threw us into a loop of things from a virtual perspective. So the world had completely shifted. So nothing will ever be perfect, like you said. And I totally agree with that, because you have to be able to shift, and also you need to be able to adapt. So your disruption is more of I think of it as adaptation to change, where look, new generation of sellers, they're totally different in how they're going to form relationships, how they're going to have conversations with people. And what's so magnificent is that those old ways still have some sort of context to it, but they're not good. They're very limited in how they fit into that peg that's in that hole that's there. So like, if you really think about it, we have to adapt to the changes of the generations and to the changes of the buyers that are out there. And I'm with you 100%. I mean, I could think of terrible teachers. I'll give you this one. I'll give you an example. This is for everybody.
Yeah.
I did a public speaking course. You think I should be good? My teacher was someone of hard of hearing. And so they sat in the back of the room as we were presenting. And I remember you had to speak louder and you had to be thoughtful of that. But me being not as in tune with how I presented, I would get lost in how loud I was actually speaking. And I actually ended up failing the class, which was, I don't know. That's my worst experience.
We all have experiences like that. Oh, and by the way, there was a caveat to what I said. I forgot to mention. I have had a perfect class, of course. They're only led by Matt Weiss. You did run an enablement company, and it gained a lot. So yeah, I did have a perfect instructor, perfect class, led by you. No intent of flattering, but
I'll take it.
But yeah, like, look, I have taught classes that have flopped, right? And I think that we all have, and I think it's important to have that humility and reflection. And part of me really sympathizes with other teachers who have had that moment. We can't deny the impact that has on the student, in this case, you, but we've all had that moment where we've been failed undeservingly so. Maybe it's because of unfair expectations or something else, right? Or, maybe you are just bad moments, right? But sure. I think that we have to recognize this instance. We can look at that in a sales context too. Let's look at how sales training looks today. You have someone, they may not be hard of hearing, right? Which poses an understandable barrier in our ability to assess a salesperson. But they may be a sales ops person, a sales manager, a team lead, something else. And they are assigned to create as one of their 8 roles within their one job, sales enablement. Now, how do you think that person is going to do? They have to hit other numbers. They have to do their thing in Salesforce and do this, that, and the other. And now they're asked to do this really intellectually complex task of teaching a product, a methodology, systems, and all these other things. And what they teach and how well they teach it will have a material impact on their student, in this case, the salesperson, their ability to perform, which is their livelihood, which impacts their entire family. So this is a major job that people have with major consequence. And it's always that top thing on the to-do list to create curriculum, which they're, nobody's trained on how to do curriculum, to create lessons, to create assessments, which are incredibly complex if they're done right, and then put that person out into the world so that they can succeed. Then when it doesn't happen, profitability suffers, and that person is less likely to have a successful career. So you provided a very simple example of how this can go wrong. I think that we need to take a step back and say, if there's a company like Salesforce, is sales enablement right for every single company? No, but it should be more common practice and done, I would argue, more thoughtfully and with more time than how most companies are doing it today. But if Salesforce is willing to reinvestigate how much time they're investing into this, and if they're willing to split out more time and more roles and more money for it, why are more companies, especially 50 employees and above, doing the same thing? And why aren't they taking a curricular focus? So in other words, let's look at kind of long-term development. Why are they taking, by and large, what I see is kind of a course at a time, an initial training, an enhancement of a particular more narrow skill set? Why aren't we looking at the bigger picture? I think is just a really important question to ask.
You nailed it on the head with that. I think there's something to be said that resonated with me with what you were talking about. One, the complexity of actually creating curriculum. Listen, I don't have formal training in curriculum design.
Which is fine. I've gotten the master's in it. You're fine. You know, like,
great.
How much benefit to get that? I don't know, but I guarantee you have good intuition around it. In fact, I know it. Anyway, sorry, not to cut you off.
No. Yeah. And my intuition is, how do I create curriculum that is best for the audience that I'm building at that moment? You know, how does it, especially for a sales audience? Listen, salespeople are the most amazing people in the world, and there is honestly a simple formula to getting them to buy into content. Now, could I create better content? Yeah, of course. Could I hire a curriculum designer, which we'll get into a little bit later? Yes, I definitely should, who can actually create something that has structure and more meaning behind it. But the meaning I put behind is very simple. What's in it for you? How am I going to help you succeed? And how are we going to lift the organization together? So there's the buy-in by telling them what's in it for you. And the curriculum talks about that and constantly hits it forward. But more importantly, it's how are we going to lift you as well? So it's not just about, we're going to just teach you the skill and you can take it or leave it. It's like, how is this skill going to change who you are in your selling process? Are you going to take a little bit? Are you going to take a whole lot? It's up to you, but this is what's going to help you lift a couple percentages, which could change the dynamic of your selling in a quarter. And then finally, lifting the organization, it's a team effort, right? You want to make sure not only are you helping the individual, but in sales culture as well, we're a team. You know, there's such an amazing dynamic in the sales culture that we're not going to single anybody out. We're going to work on it together, but obviously we're going to enhance ourselves as well. So I'm with you on that 100% of like where it is and how people are looking at it. So Steve, let's take a look at the two things we talked about. You know, and this is really big because I'm starting to see the trend starting to move in this direction, but obviously we have a long way to go. It is taking a look at the data and understanding that and taking a look at the people and putting an empathetic piece into it. So I'd love for you to kind of explain a little bit more about the data piece. You know, we talked a little bit about Salesforce, but you know, like what about data is it that we are potentially missing, or what, like, how should we be looking at that data to help lift an organization like that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'll start this off on kind of an odd note, perhaps, right? So sure. I can't tell you, as I was interviewing before landing at my current company, which I really, really love, I spoke with many companies that asked a similar question and they disliked my response, which I actually took as validating, because what we know is this: there's a high failure rate of salespeople. There's a high rate of underperformance, particularly at B2B software sales companies, right? We are training the same way oftentimes, even if we're doing more of it. And so that's not working. And I'm approaching this as, let's do things different. And they're like, that's uncomfortable. I don't know. You can't do that. And I'm like, what's the definition of insanity from Einstein? Something to the effect of doing the same, like finding something that doesn't work and doing it over and over again. And that's what we're doing today. Right. So yeah. What has changed? What can we do different? What has changed? just asking those two questions together. What has changed in the context? What can we do different? Asking those two questions together is really powerful. Well, here's what's changed.
Please, by all means. By the way, before you go into it, we had a question from the audience that came from, what are the changes that are happening in sales today? So this is, I mean, listen, we're in enablement, right? Thank you a lot for your question. We like to transition this way, so let's go right into it.
Yeah. So sorry, do you want me to take that question or the previous one that you had just asked?
Continue what you were talking about, because we're talking about changes. So continue what you were talking about on the change side.
So here's how I used to make a new email, right? And this could be sending like one-to-one or an email or a sequence of communication that I would use with hundreds of people at a time. A little bit of a marketing background too. So you write an email, you think it looks good, and then you send it, right? So that's like circa up to 2014.
Sure.
Today, there's some pretty good resources online where you can find data-backed emails that you can reference. Hey, if you include this in the subject line and the header, you have an 8% chance of a higher outcome, transitioning them from like awareness to interest in the funnel or something like that, right? 2% difference at any stage in the funnel is going to result in a pretty significant revenue increase. So here's what I would want to do. I would like to, first of all, start with the data point of those emails and those templates, tweak them a little bit, repurpose them for my sale, and then begin sending them out. Great. Now I am at a really good starting point. Now you could do a lot of marketers are doing, which is becoming more commonplace, getting more methodical, doing A/B testing.
Right.
And doing really good segmenting so you could do this efficiently. So I find all these companies in industry A or that have this matching set of attributes. I'm going to develop one message that's mostly the same that I know to be effective from limited A/B testing, and I'm going to send it out. We can do those things and we can act intelligently in that way. But email is an easier example. I think what's always been really elusive is what are the impact of the words that we're saying, right? So traditionally, here's what I would get in sales coaches. You're saying and a lot.
Yes, that's very traditional. Yeah.
It's like, okay, why? Like, let me try and identify with teacher. Why are you telling me that? Oh, it's really easy, and you could quantify that. And also, I'll give my native New Jersey a shout out. I can't express myself without cursing. It's a bunch of bullshit. So it doesn't mean anything, and the data supports that. But what does the data say? It actually says a lot of things. So for example, you are more likely to have a successful outcome from a call if you start with, is now a bad time, and asking in the negative. There's theories as to why, right? So first of all, we can measure what it is that's working within a team, use that as a starting point. If you don't have those tools, and even if you do, you can refer to some pretty useful insights that are online. And then you could use that as your starting point rather than just what sales has traditionally been, which is sink or swim. You have it or you don't. No. You will have certain advantages, no matter who you are, and disadvantages. But we can also teach you things that work to get you to a better place sooner in a way that is validated and constantly revalidated. I could go on and on. I'll pause myself there. But I think it's really important that we are being more intelligent, long story short, in how we operate by measuring ourselves and using measurements that others have made to just act in a more thoughtful way.
I agree. What measurements are already out there and using them. Also tracking what you're doing today, which shouldn't just be your job, by the way. It should also be marketing's job too. Because they're the ones that are out there creating messaging, the ones that are going out there being the voice of the customer. So sales is speaking to the customers, but when it comes to marketing, messaging, and all that, you also need to pull in metrics to understand, is that messaging even working? Is it corresponding with sales? And tracking those metrics so that marketing can help cater new messaging and show them what works. So you have an internal team and an external sourcing that's helping you take taking these data points and saying, if you use this, the percentage could change drastically in your pipeline. And I love to throw this example out there. From a data perspective, and you and I have chatted about this. For everyone that's watching this, there's a philosophy I follow constantly. People make the business successful, period. And data steers that ship to success for those people. And I think one of the common things that we're seeing, and this was brought up in the comments, is that our businesses are focusing heavily on data, not just from a sales perspective, but everywhere. But here's the funny thing. I'll give two things. One, any business that says we're a data first company needs to stop saying that immediately. Unless if you have no people working for you and your product sells itself online, then yes, you are a data first company. Thank you. But if you have people working for you, selling your product, going out into the field, you are not a data first company. You are a people first company that pushes data to use and help make those people successful. So when I hear that term, it blows my mind, because when you have people, you've got to focus on those people. And the data is what's going to help lift, like we're talking about. The second thing that we're talking about with data there, and I find this to be amazing. And, we talk about staging, right? If I change that percentage of, like, let's say I blast an email with a particular phrasing that I know is going to give me at least a 7% lift in a connection, which could change the dynamic of my pipeline. But here's the funny thing. We have so much data as an organization now. Do we actually know our data? So I'll ask you this, Steve. Here we go. As a seller, overall, in your time, how long have you been selling for?
Oh, my goodness. But does it count from when I was 11 years in the professional sphere, not counting into childhood? Yeah. And then I've taught for another 2.
So perfect. Out of the 11 years, what was your average closing percentage? Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. That's a problem.
Okay. So look, we have all this data, but we especially in the selling world, don't actually know our data. And let me ask you this, even an in-depth question. What is your average lifetime of moving deals from stage 1 to stage 2? So out of 100% of deals in stage 1, what percentage of those are converting to stage 2? Yeah, you didn't even think about it. You don't even need to answer.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because of course. Yeah. Point taken.
But I think what's important here, and I agree with you, like the data needs to represent that. But I think even from a bigger picture perspective, to add to that is that we need to teach people actually what that data is and what it means and why it's important to them. You need to put your stuff into Salesforce. How many times have sellers heard that? Yes, I know. There's a process in place, all that. But let me ask you, do you know why? Oh, the business needs it. What about you? Like, if I don't know your conversion rates from stage 3 to stage 4, how am I going to help you in this education system? How am I going to provide you the right data? How do I look for the right data in order for you to succeed and lift? Because maybe that 3-4% is the difference in a deal closing in the end, allowing you to hit quota. And I think that's part of the data piece that I want to definitely throw in there with you, accommodating to, we need to teach this stuff, though, the right way.
Yeah, to me, I remember one of the first sales trainings I led, I was telling sales reps, like, okay, like we're going to now do a session in Excel. And they're like, this happened. They're like, what? Like, I talk pretty, man, but like, I don't do data and crunch numbers. That's why I'm in sales. I'm like, oh, weird. Because this is what I've done with data. I find the easiest layup sales, and then I call them and say, hey, we're working with company A, your company B, your exact competitors, maybe we should talk as well. And they're like, huh, that's interesting. Much better than, hey, like, here's all the benefits and blah, blah, blah. There's no, just give me the layup so I have to say less and do less. I don't have to be a good seller necessarily at that moment. It helps if I have like a no-brainer call that's just very well-researched and put together. And by running a spreadsheet with a filter on it, I could usually pick those things out, right? So data can be helpful that way. We can also overcomplicate it. To me, the best place to start with data is, what's your funnel? It looks like this. You have, everybody calls different stages, different things, all the way to generating revenue. What's your success rate for moving from here to there, from here to there, from here to there, from here to there? Find where you think you could drive improvement. So now you're analyzing your data. It's a really important part of it. And then you're posing a theory on, I believe that if we change this behavior, then we can also change the percent of progression from stage 1 to stage 2, and just have that very narrow focus and improve one thing at a time. But to your point, this is what happens with data a lot. You could pull data on anything and everything, and so we're thinking about it tactically and not strategically. Let's be really strategic in how we use data. Let's do less and not more. Let's be really thoughtful here. So how do we do that? Again, just go back to the funnel and use that starting point. Think about it. And also, before ever utilizing your data, you should always ask the question, wait, do I need data to prove this point? What I've seen at companies, like really bright people, and like actually even like great leaders overall, we all have our faults, but like an over dependence on data, which means we're only doing a retrospective analysis on things that have already happened, and we're living in a fast changing world. So we're not getting ahead of the curve. We're always just chasing our own tail. Yeah. And so like, we got to be careful when we're diving into data for sure. And we got to just like think outside of a spreadsheet sometimes too.
I would agree. You got to be careful with that, just because one of our favorite words out there, especially if, speaking with leaders and all that, risk. And you're right. And I think that it's something that is very important, is that how businesses operate today has shifted so fast that you could take the safe route and just only do data, which is fine. Like, you're doing the safe route, but if you want to be ahead of it, you have to invest in some sort of risk and intuition and thoughtfulness behind it, with goals in mind, right? You still plan it like a regular, project plan and all that, but there may not be as much data, but there's a lot more intuition involved, a lot more theory behind it that may help elevate that.
I always look at it as a batting lineup. You got 9 batters in a batting lineup. I haven't watched baseball in years, so you don't have to be an expert to like pick up on this. Just look at the first 4 people in your batting lineup. Your leadoff hitter, your number 2 hitter, just like, it's going to work. Like, they're going to get on base a lot, really high percentage, but they're not going to hit a home run. You don't need them to. You just need that like reliable getting on base. And you got your number 3 hitter, and then you got your number 4 hitter. They're going to hit 225. They're not going to get on base a lot, but when they make contact with the ball, it's going to be a home run. And if everybody got on base before that batter, it'll be a grand slam. So I think it's just about balancing risk in that way. Okay, like every fourth, every 4th, every 20th, whatever it is, I'm going to take a risk and try something new and different. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to balance my strategy by also using what the data supports. That could very easily transfer into, I always use this example when designing territory plans. What I'm not doing, what I don't teach people to do, is just call down the list and learn how to talk pretty and ask good questions. What we want to do instead is say, how do we take those big swings and offset that risk with high likelihood, high velocity closes? Let's have like a really well integrated strategy and not think the short-term tactic, which is just saying the right thing at the right time.
First of all, sounds like you love the movie Moneyball, which is great. Great movie.
Just watch it again. It's solid. Shout out Tom Single, got me back into it. Yeah.
But, so the data piece is absolutely important. I think there is the way in which we look at data. We have to be smart, but not so meticulous that we get lost in the data, because it's very easy to do that. Yeah. I also, like we talked about, data can also involve some risks. Because if we just follow the data, we might miss a step in following the progression of the future, and not being so heavily reliant on data, but instead being smart and allowing ourselves to risk things with a plan that is, hey, if we do this, the results could be X, giving a sense of, wow, we could get here, and I can balance my investment of how I'm going to do things. Now, of course, from a data perspective for us in Sales Enablement, it's super important. It tells us which trajectory to go, and more importantly, how to lift a team and teach managers how to mentor individuals in the process. But here's the thing. We talked about data, but then we also have the education piece that I think also, like you talked about, is a major concern and a major thing that is shifting constantly today. But in this case, it may not be shifting as much as we thought.
Yeah, and so like I think one important point, jump before I get to that exact question, talking about data, let's look at it like this. It is a tool. Data is a tool, and in the same way that a hammer is a tool of the carpenter. So to say your data first is like saying a plumber is toilet first, or like a carpentry business is hammer first. Who's swinging the hammer? How well do they swing the hammer? How well are they using this tool? Sales training is actually really terrible at teaching people how to use data. Again, it's focused on tactical. How do you say it? Sorry, that's a little bit harsh. Of course, it's not a universal truth. It's just it is the truth that I have experienced to this point.
And this is why you're here. I'm okay with that. So throw it down, man.
Yeah, look, I think this really interesting thing that, to be candid, I'm still struggling with is I've never been the star in math class. I was thrown out of math class probably more times than I got an A, and in college, I talked my way out of taking math. A really good indicator I should be in sales. And then when I was in sales and then sales management, running enablement, it's like, oh, let me learn how to use this stuff. But when I was learning about learning at BU, they said like, it's actually a mindset. Everyone is capable of math, but we're conditioned pretty early on that we're not good at it. Today, they teach math in a very different way, still flawed, never going to be perfect. But they teach in a different way because it's not that I was necessarily bad at math. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But it is probably more likely that the way that they taught it didn't resonate. There were no images, there were no pictures. It wasn't real examples, and I didn't care. I wasn't engaged. I wasn't given the why. So today, when we teach, there's actually some really simple, important lessons. Nobody's going to want to learn until they get the why. They're not going to want to work within an example until they know it's very realistic, if not something that actually impacts their work. They're going to be uncomfortable until they learn that it's okay to make a mistake. And they're not going to do as well if they're not having fun. If it's a high anxiety environment, it's off. And also they have to like their teacher, right? That's something I'll always struggle with. It ain't gonna be easy for anybody, but I'm doing the best I can, right? But look, so now the interesting part of all this is what we're taught is like, you have to demonstrate something on an assessment. That is very high pressure, and it's sales, which is high pressure. So how do we create a low pressure learning environment? If we're listening to all of the great research that's been done, says that's what helps people learn faster. How do we reconcile these two very high pressure, low pressure environments? And I think it's actually pretty easy. Make it fun, use that as your guide, and let your personality dictate how to do that. That's going to be really important, and have a very concrete way of assessing what success looks like. Keep an open and flexible mind, right, of what success could look like. Be willing to be surprised and integrate people. Be less willing to shut them down when they come up with a new and different idea. But let's have a very concrete starting point for what success looks like. So we could also give concrete feedback and help people prioritize what they have to learn. You don't need a teacher to do this. Everybody has a million things they could improve. What's one thing you're focusing on? How will you measure success? Is like a pretty decent starting point. And go easy on yourself as you're learning.
So for you, like when you talk about that success, like what are the things that you're thinking of right off the bat to make that successful, like to look at that success path?
Yeah. So for example, with a cold call, right? Just to use that. I will usually have like a checklist of I'll present a scenario. Hey, this is the scenario that you'll be working with. Mm-hmm. This is actually how you will be assessed at the end. And you may not get it right. And that's okay. Cause like we're learning. I want you to make mistakes with me, not with a client when it's expensive. Make your mistakes with me. Right.
Yes.
And then it's like, all right, so you're going to do each of these things. Like as you're writing out your script, we're going to write, because it's a really great way to get you to be thoughtful with your word choice. We'll verbalize it after in practice. But here's how I'm assessing you. Let me just put it right in front of you. Here's exactly how I'm going to assess you. As you're writing, use this as your checklist. And and then when you speak, I will give you feedback and you'll have practice using that same exact checklist. And then if you need to get green lit, you will again have that same checklist. Oh, and by the way, heads up, there will be people who learn this faster than you, and it has zero correlation to how well they could do the job. So if it's taking you a little bit longer, I'm not worried about it. Like, it's okay. I'm giving you permission to fail.
Oh, nice.
Like, that is, I think a learner really values that. It makes them want to do well, and it takes out that anxiety. It removes that mental bandwidth so they could just focus on the task and feel a little bit more comfortable taking risk and failing, which ironically leads to a higher success rate.
I think, so a few points. One, failure. Yeah. And I had a recent episode that I did where we talked about a safe environment within the workforce. And it's not like, listen, there's so many aspects to a safe work environment. And one of the safety measures is that ability to fail. Because if we were always successful, your business would be worth extraordinary amounts of money. But no matter what, there's always failure. And because you can anticipate that there's always something that's going to fail, whether if it's a project, whether if it's a call, whether if it's closing a deal, whether if it's anything within a business, the business needs to approach that safety measure of, listen, we get it. Failure is what happens. We calculate failure in our statistics on a regular basis. And if you don't, you might want to. But as we do that, we need to create that safe environment. I like the way you put it. It's okay that you may learn a little bit slower. I've learned this about you. Or perhaps maybe you failed, and it's okay. But let's continue to move forward to look at why you failed and how we can get you there to become successful. That's, I think, one of the most important things. And so it comes to two things in mind. One, I had a CEO that said to me once, he's like, Matt, I don't care that you fail. I think it's important that you fail. You learn from your failure. What you don't want to do is fail the same thing, doing the same thing twice, because you haven't learned anything. So if you're going to fail, be willing to not do the same thing and adjust how you're going to succeed, because the way you were trying to succeed made you fail in the first place. So I think it was very there it is in front of you, and it resonated with me, as you can tell to this day. The second thing you talked about learning and how we teach people. There's one thing I could suggest for the audience of how I actually approach my learning mechanisms when I'm facilitating a room or anything like that. So I was taught at a very young part of my career something called formatic learning. So you can look that up, formatic learning, and it just shows essentially how people learn. It dissects the brain into 4 different categories. So imagine just a big T, and you simplify it, right? So these are the types of learning styles that are out there, right? And this goes for young children all the way to very, very old people, right? So there's a quadrant that I found very interesting. Tell me why we're learning this in the first place. If you tell me why, everything else you teach, I'm in. Or perhaps you're a what person. What is it that we're actually learning today? Can you give me the outline? Can you kind of show me exactly what we're going to be going through? Because I don't care about the why, right? I'm here. I just want to know what we're learning, and I'm bought in. Then there's a lot of people fall into this category of how people, kinesthetic learners, get hands-on. I want to know how to do this. Listen, I know why we're here. I know what we need to do. As long as you teach me how to do this, like product teaching or go-to-market strategy or email setups, they need to actually get in there and do it. So like the way in which you did when you're doing an assessment, it's like actually write me out an email, send it to me, and tell me what that marketing plan is. Like they're learning how to do it. And then one of the last and final ones that most organizations don't always catch is your what if people. Your what if people are the ones who are at the end of the meeting at like 1 minute left, they ask a question. It is actually considered a learning style because essentially they had something that they were holding in the entire time thinking I'm going to get it, and nothing clicked at the very end. They almost had it all together. And as a facilitator, you need to actually work with those people and go full cycle through formatic learning all over again in order for not only that person to learn, but everyone else to ingest as well. So that's how I've always taught. And that's, you guys can all look that up, formatic learning. That's how I approach any type of facilitation and any type of assessments that I'm putting together.
And it's incredible, the what if. I think oftentimes, first of all, we use the word smart or intelligent, but we have to realize that there are many different types of intelligence. When I played sports, so I used to play rugby with this guy named Luke Hume, who was a kinesthetic genius. Just had the amazing ability to control his body. He also had an incredible ability to see the field. He was brilliant. He may not have done well on a math test, right? I also know that there are people who are very clever. At the moment, boom, they say the right thing. That's another type of intelligence. Cleverness is a type of intelligence. And then there's all these others. The problem is when we say smart, oftentimes I think it's actually cleverness or quick thinkingness or the quickness in picking something up. That's what we define as smart when it's mistaken. That what if person was collecting information. Maybe they were a really good listener. Maybe not, but I'm willing to bet they were collecting information. Maybe they're not as comfortable speaking up. When you're speaking up, you're more likely to be seen as intelligent. False correlation. This person is listening, taking it in. They're being introverted, and then all of a sudden, they're at the end of the meeting, and maybe they want more information, or maybe they've just collected enough when they want to speak up. Either way, what I could tell you is the meeting formats that we have in business aren't conducive to allowing those people to contribute in a thoughtful way. And so how do we identify and adjust for those people so we're not just going with the one who had a good idea, maybe in the moment, instead considering the whatever. So hit on a sore spot, Matt. I'm the whatever.
Which is quite all right. It's when we, like you said, when we come to realize and understand that that is a learning style. There's something that's missing that is not connecting the dots. As a facilitator, I need to connect those dots for you. And I've seen it a lot of times where facilitators brush those people aside. Or the common one, let's talk after the meeting. It's like, what about the rest of the people? It's like, wait, what happens if this connect the dot is part of my thing? We would do better. I know it's move fast and break things and fast, and like, hey, let's not let perfect be the enemy of the good. Like, there's all those things are true, but like maybe we should back off on trying to reach a conclusion at the end of 30 minutes. If you reach an end, just think about this. All right, hey, we have a 30-minute meeting. These are the things that we're going to discuss. There's a lot of social pressure involved. Your jobs are on the line with how you perform. You all have a certain amount of anxiety and a lot of stuff going on in your lives, and you have client emails coming in. At the end of the 30 minutes, we are going to make this decision that will dictate the course of our company in a way, small or large. Sound good? No, that sounds terrible. Well, then why are we doing that all the time? Why are we just, I don't look, and I'm not saying like I know a better way. Let's do it. I'd probably come up with one. But I'm not going to try and do it right now because I'd rather, sit back and think about it and be intelligent in a different way, not clever. I think for everybody in the audience, why is it set up that way? Why are meetings set up that it's just high pressure, high intensity, fast, and then get out? It's almost like the meeting doesn't want to happen, but we wanted to get through it as quick as possible. We all know how that works out in the end most of the time. So what have you seen? Why is it that way? What would you change? Now, Steve, one of the last things I wanted to talk to you about, of course, you talked about the education system. We talked about within sales, right? We talked about the data and how we can use the metrics. We talked about the education piece and how we approach learning and how we approach assessments. But also, I think what's important is, and you mentioned this at the very beginning, is how do we combine true education in with sales? So I'd love for you to hit on that, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive question, and I think awesome. The right way to start is what are the things that we endured in education, and what did the great teachers that you had really do? Now, which one are you emulating? Why? Right? I think this may be more powerful for people to lead their own reflection, but I think we can identify that we are more likely to do the things that we've seen in education that are common practice because they're quick and easy and everybody's really busy.
Right.
So here's just some, like, I don't know, pro tips, whatever you want to call them.
Give us the pro tips, man.
Reduce or cut out the multiple choice. Clearly define what success looks like for the person in a way that's completely transparent for how they're assessed. And so you should structure a cold call. Tell them what it should probably look like, and then be flexible when they come up with something interesting. Load people up on resources, right? Make sure that they're comfortable using them. So test them on their use of resources.
Yeah, right.
Test them on, and when I say test, I'm not like you succeed or you don't, but like, hey, you're going to work with material actually be using in your day-to-day job. So if as a salesperson, if you want your salespeople to tell stories really well, have them dig through collateral and pull out customer stories and then tell you those stories back, right? And then talk through that. Keep it in a, don't make it about the test, similar to what you said, but in a different context. Make it about the person. And if you have that healthy balance of, I'm going to really work with this person and really care about their development, while also making it really clear what the outcome is. And I'm going to question what I'm doing if it's something I hated in the past and as I endured my education. If I'm willing to ask those questions of myself as I'm designing the program, I think that we're great. And also just hire a teacher when they're off for the summer and have them design your curriculum. I don't care if they're a second grade teacher or a college professor, just they need the money anyway. And even if it's a complex product, they can add structure regardless of if they've ever been in sales or of any experience with your product. They can ask you questions and they create structure around that in a way that's like hard and often doesn't get enough consideration and enablement today.
There's that one's a new one for me that I will probably end up doing, which is not a curriculum designer, everybody. Sorry. Have you seen the videos that I'm doing? I don't know how to set these up anyway. Imagine me trying to put a curriculum design together. I'm just putting it based off of what I know and how people can react to it. But if you bring in a teacher who actually, that's their profession, curriculum design, you just help guide them for a summer to build out content and creation and all that. A teacher is a curriculum designer. It doesn't matter what stage of education they're in. They know how to design. Hire them. Bring them in. You don't need to bring them in full time. Right? They want to get back to teaching, but maybe they want some summer cash. There's some teachers that want that. Bring them in. It's not going to bring negative impact on your business. That is for sure.
Yeah. And like, there's varying styles of teaching. It's constantly changing what they're, there's many ways to do it. And of course, many different ability levels within those teachers. So it could be potentially challenging to screen, but you probably won't regret doing that. I look at predictable revenue, which is written by, like, Salesforce has a great product that helped them sell, but they're also really methodical in how they sell. SDR, BDR role being broken out from account executive was really popularized by them, as are just really the splitting out of many different sales roles. So it's not just one account executive doing everything. And so the principle is if you spend about 20% of your time doing something, you should actually probably make a role for that. So I spend 20% of my time doing outreach to prospects. Oh, we should create an SDR BDR role, right? We could look at enablement in the same way. Oh, you're investing a lot of time, or should be investing a lot of time that you don't have to create an enablement program that will enhance revenue, but with less headcount, make it very profitable. Oh, interesting. We should not just use our budget for training. And maybe we hire someone for the summer or a full-time employee who understands learning theory, curriculum design, and maybe can teach as well, because even those are 3 different roles. So, yeah.
I like that. Just always remember that, everybody. 20% might need to change your strategy and bring in some new people. So, Steve, first of all, I wanted to thank you again for joining in. Thank you for the breakdown of the education system. Thank you for breaking down data. More importantly, understanding how the sales education system is today and how it's kind of broken. I actually like where it's going. It's moving in the right direction. I think we need to, as people who are vested in this category, really need to hone in and focus on now the bigger picture items. We have all the data. Now let's use that data the appropriate way and how we look at it and how we implement. In the same way, implementation, how do we actually make it the most impactful sessions, seminars, workshops that sales reps can pull out of and make them strong because they're already great people. How do we lift them and even make them greater? I really appreciate your time today. Of course, there were a few things from the audience I'd like to share with you. And then, of course, at the end, we always like the shameless plug, but a few things here. Erica dropped in and said that it's true. As an educator, I am getting so much freelance work from companies who want to invest in human skills. Which, Erica, yes, that's a part of it, right? You got people and you got data. I'm glad that you're able to do this well. We also had Alok, who I mentioned earlier, asked about the challenges of what's happening in sales today and how we're coping with it. I mean, Alok, we hit a lot of pieces here, but I mean, Steve, it's constantly changing. You just have to be aware of the changes and understand that the old things that we are doing just aren't fitting right now. And if you continue to that trend, that team is no longer going to be as effective in the field for sales.
Yeah.
And then finally, we had one where Tony dropped in and says, sales is changing. The process will be enhanced by utilizing digital delivery of content of plus messaging and then stopped at and. We'll work with that. But, yes, digital content delivery. What are the next steps? Steve, you and I could talk about that all day. But again, I appreciate it, brother, for jumping on. Please, by all means, take these last moments and live with Weiss. We always allow the guest to shamelessly plug everything that's going on. So, Steve, it is all yours.
It's easy because I love my company. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. I really do appreciate it, and excellent deep listening skills, by the way. It would probably be a good thing to have you lead a session for me on that. I work at a company that kind of blends together my two worlds, right? So I taught in an inner city for 2 years with really bright students, but who weren't necessarily given the opportunity they deserved in school, right? I was middle school in Springfield, Massachusetts. I also sold for 11 years. I sold software. I found it more gratifying leading sales enablement than selling multi-million-dollar deals. That ultimately led me to become a teacher. And now I do sales enablement. I work with really bright people who are looking to relaunch their career and get into sales and just have a better financial future for themselves. So I teach students looking to get into sales. That's what my company does. We lead sales boot camps. My company also increases the skills of existing sales reps, a really diverse set of clients that we have, everyone from private equity firms to various different types of software. And we train their employees and give them not just, hey, here's your training, good luck, but sustainable ways to increase the skills of their sales team. And also, once we train salespeople in bootcamp, often we get them hired with our corporate clients. So the name of my company is Victory Lap. I've been there for a few months doing digital content in response to that comment. Couldn't agree more. And also leading live trainings for both companies and those students in sales bootcamp. So if you know anyone who is getting into sales or is interested in getting into sales, they should check out Victory Lap on the website, or they can just email me at steve@victorylap.com. Or if your company is looking for training, same thing. Just hit me up, go to our website at victorylap.io. So thanks very much again for having me. That's what I do. What an awesome conversation. Too bad we don't have another 7 hours, unless you want to stay on the line,
Nope, not at all, because nobody wants to stay here for 7 hours. But yeah, we'll probably have another session that we can dive deeper into. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. By all means, drop some comments, share this video. Let us know your thoughts on the current state of the sales education world. And Steve and I are more than happy to join you. Be sure to check out Steve at Victory Lab. Great company. I love what y'all are doing and continue to drive it. So please reach out to Steve by all means. But again, thank you. Y'all take care. Have a good one. We'll catch you next week.
Thanks, Ian.
You want the fight?